Shamps and giggles, history, news, views, and reviews from a black perspective.
So here we are. It's just amazing. So many things to talk about. By the way, what about this subject of 1066? We're halfway through the show. It's a good opportunity to bring it up. Apparently, I mean, we all went to school, right? 1066, never saw a black man in the history books. In fact, I can remember the history class. I had zero interest. None. There weren't a black face in there. Come to find out now that in 1066, the group known as the Normans, or in that time, there were black people. And that was brought to our attention, of course, in our We Love Zooming group, which is quite amazing, where our listeners, by the way, you know what, whilst we're in there, I'll put the link in the chat. Radio listeners, you do have to come join us online, and then you can also get bringing to all these things that we're doing. But 1066, apparently there were black people around that time. I mean, who knows about this? Or am I the only one to have found out? Oh, it sounds like it was just me.
No. Remember, Joe, we had somebody in, I forgot his name. He had a station about Black history, and he talked about well before slavery, how there was quite a lot of Black people living in the UK well before slavery. I can't remember his name, but he used to talk about Black history. So it's something that I've been aware about for a little while.
Right, yeah, but well, we remember Severus. We did a thing about the Severus. I think Keith did that one, and that was in York. There was black people up in York, but these here Normans of 1060, because we studied 1066 at school. That's why it's a bit more striking. Everybody remembers the Battle of Hastings, 1066.
Yeah, but according to Charles, you know, that battle could have been the racist battle of 1066, which was the Normans, yeah.
Charles? Who's Charles? King Charles?
No.
Oh.
The woman where we're getting the information from, Diane Charles. I mean, Maria Charles.
Oh, Maria Charles, right, yeah. Do you know what, guys? It's quite interesting because all we don't have video. You know, look at us, we're spoiled now. Video, the whole 9 yards. When you go back then, look at that. You go back then, and there's no video. It's just the pictures that people drew, and they drew them in. Well, everybody was white. And what I noticed now, if you go on Google and you do a search about Black Battle of Hastings, some of those thumbnail pictures, they got black faces in them. And so you see the narrative has changed. But we were brainwashed as kids. Right? We were brainwashed.
Yeah, we were, because we was only taught about the Tsar or the World War II. We wasn't talked about anything to do with our history, and that was, as we know, was done deliberately.
Yeah. There was somebody, you're quite right, who came when he did speak about that. That was what's his name? That was a couple of years ago. He was doing the thing with Mr. C.
Yeah, that's correct.
And he used to go into it kind of deep, didn't he?
Yeah, he was really good.
Yeah. It was well deep. Good Lord. Yeah. Oh, the name's gonna come big. Toronto Karen, while I'm thinking.
He's talking about the royal family. Some of the, I can't remember which one of them, that they were actually black.
Yeah.
Not Queen Charlotte. It was a man. Was it Henry? Henry the Eighth. One of them. I can't remember. He went all the way back and found out something about one of the royals.
This was in our early days. Was it George? Yeah. This was in our early days. This was during lockdown. When everybody had time.
Sorry, that wasn't. That was the print. Well, you've got a few black kings. So because you've got the Black Prince.
The Black Prince. Oh,
Yeah.
who are the Black Kings first that you're referring to? Black Kings. Mansa, Shaka Zulu, obviously he's one.
No, we're talking about like, well, you've got I think it was the Dark Prince.
The Dark Prince.
Can I mention a book that would be useful?
Come in, Miles.
It's the Mathurin Muir. He was a lawyer in the King Parliament. Also, you have King Arthur.
King Arthur was black.
King Arthur was. Yes, he was. King Arthur was black.
No way.
Yeah.
King
Yes,
Arthur
he
was
was.
black.
Yeah. And what I'm
but
trying
that's me
to say,
brainwashed. I do apologize. That could be me brainwashed.
Yeah.
Which King Arthur was black? The one that
if you go,
because
when you look back at, well, we're not even looking back even at that. You've got to go back to the symbols, and the symbols are the actual shields. All the shields then that was ever carried comes from our dynasty.
The coats of arms of the families?
Sorry?
The family
Miles,
coats of arms?
I'm going to let Miles come in on some of it because he probably can fill in the little dots, but definitely the Dark Prince, definitely King Arthur was melanated, because you will see that by some of the shields, but you'd have to go to really go to, because the person who's really brought light to a lot of this recently is a woman called Dr. Maria Child, who looks at what they call the first sight of consciousness into heraldic origins, British, Irish, French, the French, Portuguese, and German.
German.
Yeah. German?
I'm German, absolutely.
Yeah, and German, yeah.
Okay. Miles, come in, tight the team.
And you'll know that there was also the Black Irish from 1630 to 1634. During the time of King Charles and Cromwell, because with the 13 to the 16 colonies that they had. And the interesting thing about that is that when you trace it back, and what Dr. Marie Charles has shown, what shocked me is that there's 1,000, we've never seen, there's 1,000 shields. And these shields, and she's done it by the surnames. So a lot of surnames where we would say, oh, our surnames are specific to African pronunciation, actually, our surnames were also Maurice, Du Bois, Miller, Thomas, Lenignon, and Collins. Right?
Okay.
And when you actually trace it all back, because even it goes back to like the Kemp, which we know from Kush and all of that. So it's really interesting, her whole study, and her study also highlights 1066, basically asking the question, well, who were the Normans? And the Normans were black people. But what I found more mind-blowing was King Arthur, and you do actually see the actual symbols, and it's really to follow the symbols, because there's also something that we don't know, that one of, like, birds, this was something like, even if you look on some of the, and this is right here in the UK, this is in places like up in Cumbria, this is in places Scotland, Ireland, right? But what I found so interesting is that some of the symbols that they have, where they have the birds are very significant to us as black, and the dragon. The dragon, the symbol, the dragon that the Chinese and everybody takes over and they make up all these different stories about belongs to us. Okay. But the woman, women, and this is something, you know, I think Tico, I sent her something some time back, a couple of weeks ago, even showing when we talk about matriarchy, where women, we rule women, because there's a particular woman, she comes from the Igbo, and her name is Hera. Hera. Um, um, she is like she was so say like she was queen of maybe fertility then, and she gave sovereign by marrying men. She was an Igbo woman, and her symbol, because this same Charles woman has the whole symbol, and on the woman's body it has, like, you know, the stars. And I know, pity that Jemmy's not here tonight, because he understands about the 48, because that's what we've now discovered, but not by her, by another man. 48 constellations, and how they've
Others,
all,
right,
because
the
they've
galaxy.
because they've just unfolded even recently, up until 7 days ago, this Chinese man. But that's another man. But we're trying to concentrate on Don't Let Me Go Off.
Now hold
But
on, Piggy.
wanted
Just
to
wait
say
one
that the
second. Just
link
wait
with
one
the
second.
new
Hold on.
with the
Hold on.
with
Wait. Don't
the
run
with
out
the
of steam yet.
pyramids.
Wait just a second. Wait just a second. Miles, what was it you was trying to tell us?
I was going to suggest to the listeners
Yeah.
that there is a book. It's called The Secret Memoirs of John Mackey. It was published in 1733 by his son after he died. So who was John Mackey? John Mackey was a spy, and he was spying for the government on the Stuart dynasty. So the Stuarts is the family who came from Scotland, the kings who came from Scotland. And the first king of that dynasty was King James, the first of England, and he's the one associated with the 1611 King James Bible. He's associated with that. Anyway, his whole family got kicked out after 4 kings. So you had first James I, Charles I, James I, Charles I, Charles II, and then James II. Those are 4 kings, and then they got kicked out. And Parliament then went to look for a replacement and you know, for the family, and they ended up going to Germany, finding their I think it was Charles I, the second king, Charles I's sister, married into the German aristocracy. So they went and got their cousins, which is the female line of the Stuarts, and they brought them over, and they were the Georges. So King George I, obviously related to the Stuarts, became King of England, and that's why they got him to come over and take over. So the question is, who are these Stuarts? And in the book, from The Secret Memoirs of John Mackey, he actually describes them. So he was basically spying on them because he wanted to make sure they didn't come back into England to reclaim the throne, because that was the threat. And they were going to France to basically raise an army, and also raise an army in Scotland as well, where they originally came from. But that book describes what they look like. And it was basically describing King Charles II. So King Charles II basically had about 13 children for 8 different baby mothers. And his wife must have been infertile because she didn't have any children. But King Charles II had children. And all of, no, I wouldn't say all of them, but 4 of his children are mentioned in that book, and they are all black. It literally mentions that so they're saying that his sons look like the dad. So they're describing King Charles II's sons. And they describe him as being tall, black, just like their dad, the king. And if you Google it right now, The Secret Memoirs of John Mackey, you'll see it. And you can it's available online. And then when I first read that, I thought, hang on, this must be fake. It can't be for real. So I'm a member of the British Library, and I went and I ordered the original book. And so when you order like an ancient book, they won't just give it to you straight away because it's not on display. So you got to order it. And so I came in the next day and I read it, and I had a copy of my one, which I got from Amazon, and I was comparing my version to the one that's the original one that's actually in the British Library, and it was identical.
Wow.
This book also is in the Royal Archives. And obviously the royal family clearly know about this because it's their relatives. So what it's basically saying is that King Charles on the throne today, he's the third King Charles, right? But King Charles II was a tall black man. How tall was he? He was 6'2", and he was, quite slim. But so here's the thing: when he died, there was a waxwork image of him that was created, and he was a black man with basically long hair. They used to wear these long wigs back in the day. At that time, he had
right.
And they had a black image of him. Right, he was black. Okay, and then around the 1800s, they decided to, his image was a bit, I don't know, dusty, and then it be cleaned up a little bit. And when they cleaned it up, he became white.
Well, Jesus is white, isn't it? I mean,
everybody
was white.
Jesus only became white after the Pope asked Leonardo da Vinci to paint him white. Prior to that, Jesus was black.
But even with the Da Vinci, if you really go back deep within the Da Vinci, how do we know that Da Vinci was a man? Mm-hmm.
Leonardo, well, it sounds like Leonardo. Very clever.
There's argument.
Could have been a woman.
There was argument that he was that it was a woman.
Or that he was inspired by
the original supper that they painted, the painting holds a lot more information in it that nobody has uncovered, not until recently by this recent Chinese man.
Here's something that's interesting. Pronto, Carolyn, I know your hands up been up for a while. Are you?
Yeah, so I wanted to say
on this subject.
Yeah, I wanted to say the sanitization and the erasure of Black people from history has been going on since time, right? That's what they do. They change the history and they make it white. But here's a thing that should be very alarming that is happening currently in 2024 in America. They are banning the teaching of Black history and African history in 23 states as we speak today. And they're calling it critical race theory. And the premise behind it is that the white people and their children who are going to school, if they know the real history of the criminality of their ancestors and the savagery of their ancestors, oh, poor white kids, what's going to happen to them in their psyche? Meanwhile, this is currently happening. They are banning, and it is Black History Month in North America right now. And now teachers have to be tiptoeing around what they're teaching to their students in school.
Wow. So it's become a big mess. They're trying to hide the lies.
Exactly.
They're trying to hide what they did because but it's all going to come out. It's come out.
Well, I say this all the time. The Black race is responsible. If you look into a home and you see all the structures and the electrical, I just learned that it was a young Black man who invented the doorknob. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
There you go.
The knob was needed. He invented it. What can I tell you?
So we are the pillars of this world that has made it from start to now, and our erasure to make us insignificant and to play into that, oh, Black people, blah, 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 it's all a bunch of crap. Can I say crap?
Yeah, I think
it's a bunch of crap. Let me tell you, we are the kings and queens of society. Know that. If you don't know, now you know.
Get to
know. That's
it. Pauline Lewis, your hand is up. Come in. Talk your things. Hey.
I just wanted to marry all the talk about history and the royal family connections, what Miles just mentioned. I don't know if anyone's been to see the slavery enslavement, I should say, exhibition at the Bank of England. It is absolutely fascinating. And it finishes next Thursday. I think it's the 22nd. And I just remembered it was on to see the directors, the prior years and years, 17th century, the whole link between finance and enslavement, when it portrayed. For me, as I work in finance, to even see the whole, how it's not been talked about. I mean, the Bank of England is the government's bank. So to see that involvement was absolutely, interesting, to see families that were involved in it. They've got the ledger of the compensation. Even go and see in the ledger where they've got the compensations that was paid to the slave owners is there to see. So they've got the original there. It is a minefield, and it's for me see that link between how our labor was used in terms of what Claude Anderson talked about, white wealth, black labor. It's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Exhibition closing 22nd of February, Slavery and the Bank. Explore the history of transatlantic slavery through its connections with the Bank of England. Interestingly, Pauline, you're absolutely 150% right. I mean, you've gone clear past 100. The bank was intrinsically involved because, of course, that's where they stored all their money. And that's what finance. And Lloyd's of London, they got the big building up there. It's in and around bank. It stands out. It's ridiculous. It absolutely does stand out. And yeah, the transatlantic slave trade, a legacy of inequality in the UK. Thanks for bringing that out. The exhibition continues on till 22nd of February. So there's 6 more days. If you heard this tomorrow, there's 5 more days. But what's the date? I'm going to give you the date. I don't normally do it. Today's the 16th. It ends on the 22nd. So the clock is counting. When you hear this message, it will be ever closer. But that'll be worthwhile visit. And it's quite alarming the things we're learning. What do you think that does, or what does that do for you? You're learning about slavery. You're learning about this country's involvement. You're learning about the lies that was told to us and taught to us when we were in school as children. Brainwashed. Come on now. Brainwashed. We were brainwashed. What does it do for you now? Hearing about this and gaining this knowledge. What is it? And this knowledge is, by the way, we've spoken about this a couple years ago, but repetition lets it sink in a bit further. So we're still talking about it now. So as it's sinking in more, what is it doing for you? Pinky, your hand is up.
Well, it's going to make me want to go and visit Scotland, Germany, because now that I know that they were black rulers of Asian Scotland, and to know that the dragon itself represents our culture, and the dragon is actually known as the great mother of cosmic energy beyond our physical world. The dragon is a herald. They have been, all of our, when I go back to talking about these shields, I feel so passionate about it because what I've gathered and understand from this same woman, Dr. Maria Charles, because what's so phenomenal about this is that even here today, all the philosophers and all, they don't want to acknowledge her. They don't want to acknowledge these findings that she has just put together, which spreads right across Europe. one of the things that I picked up, it was said that they have been depicted to show that melanated features, as it will be demonstrated that the black population, such as bangs, flaws that are FAW, fins, pitch, and moors throughout Europe, preserve the dragon as a dragonon's tradition and Typhon's practice from Africa. So they're saying everywhere black people went, they took their concept with them. So all like geometry, all the constellation of the stars and everything, it's all now being linked up. And particularly the finding that's only just been found, like 7 years ago, 7 days ago, it's just landed on the internet. Going back to the pyramids, they've now found the full constellation, the stars constellation. So when people talk about, oh, your birth sign and things, and we rubbish it, no, friend, that is actual arting. So when we come back, so I just want to come back something forward to something that all of those symbols that we see, the checkers symbols that you see, where you see the four heads, and you look good on those symbols, they're black people. But the actual, like we even see it through some of the coats of arms that you even see today. There are coats of arms. And if you go back to way back in Africa, you will see how they built their huts in this same square checkers. So it's like what Dr. Marie Charles has brought is the awareness, the conscious awareness of symbols has always been there, but we've not looked at symbols as a way of communication. Do you understand?
No,
So it
totally
comes
hear
back.
that. I appreciate that. Symbols, you remember, in the slave trade, didn't they brand their slaves? It was symbols. And the slaves were branded as they brand cattle and sheep. And as you see, all the clothes we wear, Nike, that's a form of a symbol. It's a branding, and that's what they did. They brand all their subjects. So that idea could well have come from black people.
Yeah,
but we've been
and to
brainwashed.
remember that 1066, the Normans were black, and that was us.
The Normans were black. So the lies upon lies upon lies upon lies upon lies. And here we're finding out these lies. Leisha, your hand is up, talk to things.
Thing is, the thing is that those who could write history could rewrite history. So the information's always been there, but those who could write history wrote it to their favor. I think that we're living in a time now where people are able to go a little bit more deeper and do a lot more research, about history, just generally history. Don't say black history, say history generally. I also think that we have been taught and been focused so much on the slavery aspect of our history, or African, Caribbean, or even American, African-American. Sorry, Pink, I've got to put you on mute because you keep on humming. I can't think. Here we go, sorry. When you at school, we're taught about our history as slaves, enslaved people, it's almost made us think that that's all we were, because that's all we were taught, that we were enslaved and that our history only goes back a certain period. And then afterwards we're taught that, Africans were very hungry all the time and had flies running, buzzing around them, and that the only way that they could be helped was if, Live Aid went there and they helped them, and Oxfam went there and they gave out these, Nestle milk and all this powdered milk things and this, all that stuff. So we're really sold a narrative that was a detriment to our culture, I personally think, as a British Caribbean, in some aspects, as a British Caribbean, we thought that the Africans weren't educated and were all very hungry and starving and lived and had big bellies and there was all these wars, and that our forefathers were enslaved, and that's the furthest back we can go. And then there was we all felt that being African as Caribbeans was embarrassing. I mean, I'm not an African. How dare you call me an African? I'm a Caribbean. Caribbean. Oh, but you were slaves. Like it sounded like a nightmare for us, but it almost was. I think it was intentional.
Of course.
Very intentional. And I think now that the younger generation, this generation now that's coming up, they're in a good place because they have their eyes are a bit more open than what ours were.
Well, don't be surprised. We think their eyes are a bit. We have to communicate these messages down the line. Thank you for that, Lucia. And what you're saying about Africa, we literally did not want to be associated with the Africans. I mean, come on. It was, the brainwashing was so intense when you was at school. You just, no, I'm not from there. Do you know what I mean? I'm not African. I never forget, Jeff Schumann used to say, they brainwash you so much. And that's what I heard today, bleaching. You wish you could bleach your skin white. Oh my God, it's just ridiculous. And we went through that as kids in school growing up. The swell belly, the live aid, the band. Oh, look at these people. And we black too, like rotted. Do you know what I mean? It was deliberate. There's no way. It was deliberate. Miles, your hand is up. Come in, talk the things.
Okay, I'm going to say a few things that might hurt people's feelings, be a bit controversial. Okay. But what I've discovered, because I went down this rabbit hole of discovering history, and I'm basically Jamaican parents, born in England, and I thought Kunta Kinte was our story. After digging up the history and using the British Library as a source, and by the way, everything that we're discussing today is all recorded. It's all recorded, and it's in various places in England, and you can go see it. Anyway, let me just share this with you. England went through a civil war. And in that civil war, you had the King of England, who was basically a black man, and we're talking about the Stuarts. And the book I told you actually talks about that. Then what happened? So the question is, what happened to all these black people? They're here. So where are they? Oliver Cromwell became Lord Protectorate in the 1600s. Okay, so Oliver, just to give you a sense of time, you had King James I, Charles I. Then there was a civil war, and King Charles, the person who came King Charles II, he had to leave the country, and he was living in Holland for a time. And during that time, Oliver Cromwell was on the throne. No, he wasn't on the throne. He was running the country. He was called Lord Protectorate. During this time, they decided to ethnically cleanse England. So they were deporting all the black Brits to the east coast of America. They were deporting the black Brits to the Caribbean. So when you said you weren't African and you believe that, in some cases, it's actually true. You weren't African. You were part of the British people who were here for thousands of years before white people came here. When Julius Caesar in 60 BC came to this country with his Roman army, who was a mixed army, black and white, he described the locals as being tall Ethiopians, which was their code for black people.
Yeah.
Black people were here. So the question is, what happened? How is it you got all these black people living in Britain? Britain is a black island. Ireland is a black island. Scotland is pure black people. But at some point, it got invaded by outsiders, and they changed the complexion of the inhabitants. It's a
Right.
bit like if you go to Hawaii, the original in the 1700s, the last queen of Hawaii, the indigenous queen, she looked like she could have been born in Jamaica, right? She looked like a black person. She was a black person. And then what happened? The white sailors came in, interbred with the women, and lightened them up. So today, Hawaiians look like The Rock, whereas back in the day, they would have looked like, I don't know,
They were darker. They were
Snoop Dogg.
darker.
Snoop Dogg.
Yeah.
His complexion. So the bottom line. So here's what, in summary, here is what my research so far has told me. The first wave of slaves, either prisoners of war, indentured servants, they did not come from Africa. They came from Europe. So you had around 1788 to 1792, the Spanish was basically run by the Moors. And they decided, and the Moors being Muslims at the time in Spain, the Pope wants to get rid of them and make Spain a Catholic country. So they went to war against them, and they deported, and once they won the war, they deported their black people to the Americas. The Spanish did this, and the Portuguese did this in the 1600s. And they used to control America back then.
Right.
Then Spain lost the war to Britain, and Britain decided that they were going to take over America from the Spanish, and that's what they did. And when they did that, the British then started to deport their black people to the Americas and the Caribbean, and that was Oliver Cromwell during that time. And then when King George, which I told you was related to the Stuarts, but through the female line, when he came to the throne, he decided to deport the black Germans to Pennsylvania specifically. How do we know this? Because Benjamin Franklin wrote a letter complaining to King George, saying, why are you sending your black Germans here when they're going to Germanize us and not us anglify them, and they can't be our color? So he was basically saying, we want to make America white, and you're bringing all these African foreigners. In fact, he described them as African, and he even said that in the world at the time, he said that the white people were the minority, even in Europe. So he described at the time the Spanish and the Portuguese as being black. He described the Irish and the Brits, apart from the Anglo-Saxons, were black. He said the Germans were mostly black and sable. He said the Russians were brown skin. He said, and even the Danish people, the people from Denmark, who were basically part of the Viking posse, they were black.
Yeah.
Here's a word for you. The word dub in the Gaelic language means black. So when Jamaicans are talking about dub music, they literally saying black music.
Black music.
But then the question is, why are the Irish and the Jamaicans so connected? Because a lot of the black Irish were sent to Jamaica.
Yeah.
And your last name, mostly Moorish names, is going to basically lead you back to where you come from. So if you have a Mac in front of your name, you're most probably a Black Scot. If you have like, I've even, in fact, and obviously, so here's what's happened. The word Moor is a black surname.
Irish, or black
the word
Irish.
Moor. The most famous Moor we know is a guy called Roger Moore, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, how does this man with a Moorish name, family name, how is he presenting as white? Either two things happened. Either the black people got deported out of the country and white people and the white soldiers took over their lands and adopted their identity. That's one option. Or they miscegenated the black people out of existence. Okay, that's one model. Last thing I'm going to say is this: in that same book I was telling you, the Secret Memoirs of John Mackey, there is an old black name that turned up called Lumley, and so I went to Durham to go and check out Lumley Castle. And in Lumley Castle, the person they show is a fair-skinned guy with curly hair as being the ancestor. But in the book, he was a black man. They say he's a black man. Anyway, here's the thing. The actress called Joanna Lumley, her ancestors are these same black families who were the nobles of Britain. So the question is, what's happened to the Moors? Either they had their lands stolen when they were deported out, or they miscegenated with white people and they eventually became white, or, you know, who knows what the other or is. But that's
Kill them there.
that's basically the story there. And
Yeah.
so last thing I want to say, so when they went to America, they found black people living in America already. They found black people living, and they enslaved them in America. Then the second group were the black Europeans were sent to America. Some of them became free because they're indentured servants, because they were European. And then the third group came from Africa. And they're the only group where they talk about. They don't talk about the black Europeans, and they don't talk about the black Americans who were there before. They don't talk about the black Africans who were sent in slave ships to America. And they were the last group to come. And there you go, I'm done.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. No, the last group, the ones from Africa, were the most traumatized because by way of how they got there. The Brits that were sent as slaves, they weren't treated in the same way, I guess. But with the Africans, it was just big business, and they put them in the little boats and as sardines. And the transatlantic slave trade. Transatlantic.
Yeah, but don't forget that was the interruption. So, but before that interruption of slavery, you know, my thing about going back to the Normans, you know, because there was Lewis Lee Norman, Gaspara Lee Norman, Harris Norman, Joseph Lee Norman, and Maurice Lee Norman. They were all black Normans, and they're all on these shields that they once carried back then, and they all can be traced back, and they're even here in the UK.
Yeah. So what we're learning,
so
really,
the name, I'm just going by the name.
No, but the information's there, isn't it? Anyone can find it. It's like it's there in plain sight, but you have to actually go and look for it. It's not.
Well, we don't, because we don't understand symbols. If you don't understand symbols, then you're not going to be able to match it.
No, whether you understand it or not, if you don't go and look for it, like Miles, when you travel, to go and see and view this information, but they're not going to broadcast it on the BBC.
No.
It's not going to happen. So you have to, and it's the same thing. Somebody went to the Caribbean and they went to the libraries and saw that all the books were white. And all of that is part and parcel of the indoctrination. And that's what they've done. They've colonized, they're colonizers, that's what they're called. And part of that colonizing, what they've done is they've taken away all our history, our roots, all that is us, replaced it with them, and then taught them as the narrative, and like we don't exist. And therein is
it's not that they. It's not that. It's that.
Wait a minute. Therein is what Bob Marley calls the slavery of the mind. They've enslaved our minds. That's what they've done. Don't need chains. It's in the mind. Leisha, your hand is up. Top thing.
I was going to say what you just said, that a lot of the information is always out there, right in front of us, in front of our faces, every single day, and the messages are all there. What I believe what the slavery did, and a lot of the messages did, was it dampened down our curiosities as people. So our curiosity about traveling and the fear of traveling. I mean, even here, it's still, people are still very nervous to go to certain places in the world because they think that it's going to be detrimental to their lives or their well-being. Possibly they might be attacked. And then that curiosity just to know about other cultures, to find out about people and things like that. So that gave us the only places that I know as a British Afro-Caribbean that our parents would want to go back to was just you came to England or you went to America and you went back to the Caribbean island that you came from. And that's the last place that you really wanted to settle down in. Now, going back to this generation, they're looking at the wider world and the opportunities and the possibilities. And another thing that we've got, which is a benefit as well, that's made our eyes a lot more open, is the education, is literacy. Because one of the things that suppresses you is your education, your literacy. They never taught in the Americas and Caribbean. Black people weren't taught to read, to write. It was, so it kept you down. Now people are curious, they can read, they can write, they can travel, they're open to meeting new people, they're open to new cultures, open to just new possibilities. And I think that is what's made it possible for us to find out more about our heritage and not just focus it and go, we're from Africa. No, we are from every part of the planet. And that's what we're finding out.
Yeah, I live on the planet Earth. I don't belong in any
It's not just reading
place.
from slavery. I mean, when Black people first came to these shores, or from even going back, this is another thing that you need to actually look into. We actually wrote English. Our names are the names that you think belongs to European actually belongs to us as Black people. That's what we're
Wouldn't
talking
dispute
about.
that in
We're
any way,
talking
mean,
about,
formal fashion.
not all of our, like Miles said, some of us do come from here because, like he said, the surnames, yeah. So when you go back and you listen to those surnames, like from the Moors was not only a people, it was their surnames. Okay, you have to go back and listen to the surnames. They were our surnames, like Miles just pointed out. If you had a Mac, I'm a Mac, you were sure to be either a Black Scottish or a Black Irish.
Yeah. And actually, there's even now you go to Ireland, there's Black people well set up in Ireland. A friend of mine, Patrick, he's from Ireland. He's just gone back there. And growing up, never would have thought it. Black people in Ireland never would have thought it. But no, they're there, thriving and surviving. Tico, your hand is up. Come in, talk the thing. This is a discussion I go on good.
Oh gosh, I need to just go back to when I think Miss Leisha and you were talking about how you were embarrassed to mention or to think of having any connection to Africa.
Yeah.
Well, can I tell you a secret?
Go on.
I was the same, and I'm actually from the motherland. When I arrived in England, I did not tell anyone I was African. I somehow managed to pull it off that I was Jamaican, because for me, they were the brown-skinned people to aspire to be. Right. So I was Jamaican. My daughter's father, who I got into a relationship with, actually thought I was Jamaican. And he was quite shocked couple of years into our relationship when it had to come out, the truth came out, but actually she's a Zulu, nothing to do with Jamaica at all.
Yeah, everybody was like.
That's my point is, we have been conditioned to hate ourselves. The images, like you talked about, the images of, the snotty-nosed, big stomached, brown-skinned child on television every Christmas time. There must be those images just to remind you how primitive you are, how backward you are, how if not for European people, you really would be. And that is the word that comes to mind is beauty, but it's not beauty. Of what's actually been done to us is that our whole narrative has been completely turned against us, and we have been somehow portrayed as the other or the inferior, when actually we were not. We don't have the Neanderthal gene. So the idea that we didn't actually evolve. We came onto the planet as we are. We didn't evolve from apes, but there are people that did evolve from apes, and that isn't the people with melanin. Unfortunately, they did actually do some study, and they found that people like us we didn't evolve from the Neanderthal. So language obviously is our thing, whether it's English, whether it's Latin, whether it's German, French, Russian, whatever it is, we invented the art of speaking.
Yeah, but imagine the abuse. We're at school, right? We don't even want to associate with our culture. We were upset. We didn't even know how upset and infuriated we were. Make them white boy come tell us any kind of foolishness. We used to beat them up. Didn't know why. Just beat them up. Just beat them up. And they couldn't win. Because we were just, you know, when a man's upset, you can't beat him, you know. He just got power from wherever, you know what I mean? And as kids, we were just upset. And then why did they knew said don't.
But do you know why you were upset? Do you understand now why you were upset?
Of course, because we were lied to. We
Yeah,
were put into a
the
situation
essence
that
of you
wasn't us.
understood.
Yeah,
The
now
essence of
we
you
understand.
understood.
It's the frustration.
But I mean, the essence of you understood when I was taught certain things in school about the complexion of, you know, the said Jesus Christ. I knew that it could not be a pink-skinned person. As a child, as a 5, 6-year-old, you just know that if that person came from there, then that can't be the way that that person looks, because if they come from there, they'd look like me. And as a child, you know this, but you've got to go along and play this game in order to actually do well. So that does actually mess up your brain, you know?
Right. And yeah. And so you're just upset. You don't even know why. And there was a time at school when I remember, I just wasn't paying any attention. Could just sound like a load of crap. I don't belong here. The crap they're teaching me, I don't fit in with that foolish. I really don't. And then you end up doing all kind of foolishness. You know, you're no longer, you're going to school, but you're no longer present. I think that's the term. You're just not present there. You know what I mean? We didn't have these mediums that they have now, the phones and all the rest of social media. It was just us. And so what you found was the black boys grouped together and we just developed our own narrative. We weren't paying attention. We weren't paying attention to the teacher or nothing, because this ain't for me. I remember one of the girls in the class said it. This don't mean nothing to me. This ain't teaching me nothing about nothing. And that's the way it came out. As a grown person now, you realize this ain't teaching me about my blackness. This don't mean nothing to me. This don't vibe me in any way, shape, or form. This is foolishness. Why should I listen to you? And I just remember
Especially
there
with
was
the
a time
internet.
in school.
We've got the internet now, so we actually have more choice of who we give our attention to. We're not stuck with, you know, broadcast with television channels.
BBC.
We can just tune in to Champs and Giggles on a Friday night, for instance.
Yeah, and get the narrative that means something to us. Watch the BBC now. A load of food. You don't even want to watch it. Listen to LBC. I don't listen to LBC. Load of crap. Just brainwashing you with just foolish narrative. It's just not us. History, news, views, and reviews from a black perspective. That's what we need, so we can connect on these truths. Thank you, Miles. The stuff you brought out this evening was huge. But these truths, is not the kind of thing that need to come out once every so often. It needs to be drummed in. We need to hear this often, more. So it's just, that's what they did to us at school. They dropped the Battle of Hastings 1066. Who cares? But it's drummed into your head such that, yeah, you know about this Battle of Hastings, somebody gets an arrow in their eye and all this foolishness. You know what I'm saying? Well, that didn't really mean anything to us, but tell us about now, oh, the Normans, they were black people. Oh, really? Let me see a picture. Now that has meaning. But again, as I was saying earlier, what does it really mean for you? Because they hid it away from us for a reason. That's why they hid it away from us. Pinky, let Carolyn first, and then we go to you, Pinky. Carolyn, talk the things.
Oh, yeah, I to the point, this conversation is so universal and international for Black people. We all have heard the story. We've all seen the images of ours not being worthy and not being contributors to society. And what an awakening it is when we start to think, wait a minute, that's not how the story goes. I remember years ago, one night, I was watching something about Kemet on the Nile. I was blown away. I was like, that's Black people. Those are my people. They did that. So to your point, you know what? It is in our hands to educate ourselves, because the system is not set up to educate us in the greatness of Black people and our contributions to society. That's not what the current education systems that we have now, that's not what it's there for. And so we have the power now to be, the onus is on us right? We don't need an external system to educate ourselves about ourselves, and what we should be doing
Here,
is
here.
drumming that into our kids, so that when our kids are in, like my granddaughter, she's half Chinese, half Black. I'm yardifying her to death. Yes. So that when she steps out, she feels no shame, because that's what we grew up with, was this huge sense of shame of where we come from and the people that we are. And we don't need to have that anymore. It's on us. We can change that. We have the power to change that.
We have the power, absolutely. Pinky, we have the power, absolutely. Pinky, come in.
Yes, we have the power. We have the power to definitely change that. And with Miles' information and the book that he dropped in, I would also, suggest to either our viewers and everybody on the panel to also look up Dr. Marie Charles, because she is just absolutely phenomenal. And what she actually shows, going back just the whole, it's for me, what it's like you're asking, Joe, what it's done for you. I mean, I'm not saying forget slavery, but for me, I just now see slavery as an interruption.
As a small part of this, as one part of the story.
A very small, very, very minute, but they've made it so to be so saturate my whole space when small. Absolutely, when I know that it's so much more vast than that. But something I want to drop inside.
We can walk with our head.
But something I want to drop,
Thank you so much, Pinky, for your presentation today. That was so wonderful and so illuminating.
The last
thing I want to say, and I want to say to our viewers, please go and look up a person called Chiron. It's from a spiritual perspective. But if you can't listen to all of it, get to the end and what it states. Because you've got to understand, the universe, and us as a people, we are so magical. We are such magical beings. And in those periods, in those pyramids, I just need to tell you like this. Every one of us, our DNA is printed in
I felt it when I was there.
Right. Something I need to tell you before this goes on. Very important.
Hold on, Pinky. Lisa, start the things. Last few words, 2 minutes remaining.
Really, really quick. And every part of history is a small blip at some point, but slavery is a major part because it was a huge genocide that lasted for several hundred years. And it's been completely ignored, like it would never existed. Hence the reason Carolyn has said, mentioned that the US want to get away, don't want to teach Black history anymore. But I think it's been a really good conversation. I'm glad that Pinky brought it up. Thank you, Pinky, for bringing this subject up. Miles,
hold on. Miles coming. We've got 1 minute left.
Okay, very quickly. There was a meeting that took place in 1970s, and on that meeting was Sheikh Anta Diop from Senegal, Ivan van Sertima from Guyana, head of British Museum, and the head of Egyptian antiquity. And they were discussing bringing back the nose of the Sphinx back to Egypt. Where is it located? In the British Museum, in the basement. They said, once they discussed it, they said to the head of Egyptian antiquity, what do you say about bringing the nose from England back to Egypt? And he says, we don't want that nose. Why? Because a Negro nose would scare away the tourists. In other words, they're hiding it, and they know the history all along. And the Arabs don't want to be faced with the fact that they are invaders to somebody else's country, and the pyramids has nothing to do with their culture, nothing to do with them.
But they take it on board, they say, because they've been migrating back and forth. So much history involved. By the way, if you listen on the radio, we do invite you to come in onto the show where we do record it, and you can have a part to say. Thank you for tuning in. For those of us in the room, the conversation will continue. We will continue talking things. But for those of us on the radio and so on, we're going to say Goodbye. We'll see you next week. Every week. Shabs and giggles. Demo.
Good night.